different lights and, how they're playing a role and how they're kind of setting you up throughout the day. The exposure to all the different types is important.
Yeah, so I mean, one thing I'll just briefly mention quickly, because you talked about closed-mindedness in science and in medicine, and that also is directly reflected in the light environment, because if we're basically blue light toxic, if we're under artificial lights and on screens all day, and we're not getting any of that balancing red, infrared, and UV light, it actually depletes our dopamine system, burns us out, and makes us basically not be able to critically think well and be more dogmatic. And we see that, I think, manifesting at the political level, at every level, essentially, in society today. And from a chemical and metabolic and transcriptional standpoint, we can see very clearly why that would be related to the behaviors that people have with regards to light. But with regards to different light frequencies throughout the day that you will encounter that you can be mindful of when you're trying to figure out, what to optimize. Sunrise time of day and sunset are very enriched in red and infrared light. That's long wavelength light that's able to penetrate deeply into the body where it can directly stimulate mitochondrial function. It also structures water to create exclusion zone water, also called easy or fourth phase water, or coherent domain water. There's lots of different names for it, but essentially it's this jelly-like form of water that actually facilitates metabolic processes, enzymatic processes in the body, and is required essentially for cellular function. So the long wavelength red and infrared light is really important for that. In the morning, like seeing the light around sunrise, depending on where you are, the window of time where you're getting access to like fully red and infrared light will differ a bit because UVA starts rising pretty quickly. So for here, where I live, about 30 to 40 minutes after sunrise, UVA starts coming in. We'll get into that in a second, but essentially if you want to see sunrise and get access to that red and infrared light, that also helps to turn on the pituitary gland. That turns on sex hormone production, pregnenolone production, the precursors to a lot of sex hormones. And so for anybody who has hormonal issues, seeing that light in the morning is going to be a huge win. And if you can stay out for that transition into UVA, that's also going to be good because UVA turns on a specific photoreceptor, which is this basically receptor that's present on your skin and eyes, other areas as well, that when stimulated sends a signal to your body and your brain about something about the light environment. So neuropsin is the name of the UVA detector that's present in your skin and eyes that gets activated when you see that morning UVA light coming into the spectrum. UVB hasn't risen yet, so we're really just getting our red and infrared light, our visible spectrum, and then UVA coming in. So that's something that our biology predicted it would be exposed to just based on, evolution, essentially. We evolved to be outside as creatures, and we've gone against that in the modern day. And I think a lot of what we're experiencing health-wise is in relation to that, and just disconnection with nature in general and not being under natural light. But so that morning light is important for those reasons. UVB starts coming up a bit later. When you see the UV index, typically that's going to be related to both UVA and UVB. But if you're looking at like your weather app and looking at the UV index, if you're trying to optimize for your UV light exposure, which I would argue that you should for reasons that we can discuss, then you're going to want to get outside when the UV index is highest to get the biggest bang for your buck. And you need the least amount of time essentially outside during that time of day, because that would be like solar noon between like 10 a.m. and 2 p.m. because you're getting more UV light at one time. So it's like, if you're somebody who doesn't have a lot of time on their hands and needs to kind of prioritize doing specific behaviors and like consolidating, then that's going to be the most efficient way to do it. If you're somebody who easily burns, seeing that sunrise earlier in the day is going to really help to turn on those skin mitochondria and help them to make melanin, which is like what happens when you're tanning in response to sun versus burning. So melanin production requires mitochondrial function and mitochondria to be online and ready to go. In addition, not blocking UV light from coming in your eyes is huge as well. So essentially there's this cascade that happens when UVB light touches your skin outside of the vitamin D story, which is of course important as well, called pro-opiomelanocortin or POMC, which is produced in the body in response to UVB light exposure on the skin and the eyes. So when UVB light hits your eyes and your skin, this POMC molecule it's this prohormone that's cleaved into 10 different unique hormonal products, is synthesized. And 3 of the products of POMC are alpha, beta, and gamma MSH or melanocyte stimulating hormone. as the name implies, these three hormones directly stimulate melanocytes to make melanin, which is what our body makes in response to UVB light if everything is going well. So if you're burning and not making melanin well enough, it could be because you're maybe under artificial light a lot, which that blue light in artificial light sources will impair mitochondrial function on your surfaces, including your skin, eyes, and proximal brain regions. And like we said before, you need those mitochondria functioning in order to tan in response to the sun. You could be blocking the light from getting into your eyes, wearing sunglasses, glasses, contacts while you're getting like direct sunlight. That's going to block the production of the alpha, beta, and gamma MSH in your brain. And the brain production is also very important for stimulating melanocytes in the skin. So we really need the coordinated expression of POMC in both the brain and the skin in order to fully engage that melanin producing system. Interestingly enough, 3 other of the POMC cleavage products are alpha, beta, and gamma endorphins, which are our endogenous opioid molecules. So in effect, nature addicted us to being in midday sun by yoking the production of these endorphins to UV light exposure. And yet the literature will suggest to you, not the whole body of literature, I mean, there's a lot of literature saying otherwise, but the mainstream literature in medicine will say, never go in UV light, essentially. It's nothing but toxic. And yet there's so much contradicting that even in their own literature, with the relationship between vitamin D status and a whole host of diseases, including melanoma, including autoimmune diseases, other types of cancers, diabetes. There's just so many conditions that are linked to vitamin D status, and vitamin D status is primarily determined by your UV light exposure, specifically the UVB. We're not really meant to get it much through the diet. We're getting some from eating fatty fish and like organ meats and things like that, which is typically associated with more of a wintertime setting. So like if you're living in an area where the ground freezes, you're going to be eating a more, fat and protein based diet because that's what's available seasonally in your area. And so you're naturally going to get more dietary vitamin D in during those times just through the foods that are available. So nature doesn't make mistakes in that way. Like everything is set up for you to be successful. The problem is that in our modern day, our frontal lobes have gotten in the way of our ability to just leverage our environment in an evolutionarily consistent way. Instead, we're mucking around with everything, thinking that we can play God in some way and that, we can outsmart nature. And it's just not possible because we are quite literally a part of nature in every way. We can't separate ourselves from that. So that's really kind of the midday sun story. Super important if we're looking to lose weight, if we're looking to get control of our appetite. So I didn't mention this before, but the alpha MSH molecule that I mentioned with regards to melanin production is actually highly associated with obesity. So if we get underproduction of this alpha MSH molecule, what happens is we're not getting the proper signaling cascade to parts of the brain like the hypothalamus, which regulates our energy expenditure and our appetite. So it's well documented that if we can get this alpha MSH production optimized through POMC production, through UV light, then we can actually naturally suppress our appetite and naturally increase our energy expenditure, which is like the holy grail, because vast majority of the time, if you're cutting calories, your basal metabolic rate's coming down because your body's defending that body weight set point because it thinks that it's going into some sort of starvation mode and it needs to conserve energy, versus if the body feels safe and is naturally integrated with its environment, it's going to naturally regulate its body weight in a healthy way. I don't really think obesity is adaptive whatsoever. It's clearly not, because it's associated with so many different diseases. It is a disease in itself, I believe, and it's due to our poor light environments, I think, largely, and the deficiency of UV light and red and infrared light that we have in modern lifestyles. So that's kind of the midday sun story. Sunset story is pretty similar to sunrise story. Again, you're getting that long wavelength light that's going to help support your mitochondria. And then after sunset, it gets dark outside, and we should try to respect that as much as possible by mirroring the outside and the inside world. If we're, obviously going to be sleeping inside and being inside at night, and yes, you may need some lighting, but the more you can reach for dim red or amber lights, it's going to be way less disruptive to your circadian rhythm, which we can get into the signals that like set circadian rhythm. But darkness at night, like darkness at night, is absolutely crucial for our bodies to enter that rest and recovery and regeneration phase that so many people aren't, because they're glued on their screens and their TVs and their phones, and they have all these artificial lights on at night, not realizing that it's literally increasing insulin resistance, decreasing HRV, not supporting the proper neurochemistry recovery that you would get from proper rest. It's not setting you up for having success the next day and subsequent days. And people are doing this virtually day in and day out. And so it's really just burning people out.